Hi class, so I wanted to pop in here before the video starts and explain that this video is running through my process of how I would draw a portrait, so a picture of a person from reference. When it comes to art, there's not one right way to do things. So last week I walked through proportions and I divided a face in half both ways. I sit on the middle line. This line down the middle is because faces are pretty proportional. So same on this side as this side. This time, I am keeping those proportions in mind, but I'm not drawing every single line that I walked you through last week.
When I draw faces, I actually like to start in the center where the nose is. So what you see me starting with here is a very basic box shape that's going to become the shape of my nose. If at any point in this video you get frustrated because you're having trouble with the basics of how to draw a nose or an eye or a mouth or whatever it is, back up. This video was made as a series that's meant to be progressive. So if you haven't been doing the portrait options for our class assignments this quarter, back up and look at the weeks past in those videos, because I start with a detailed video of how to draw each of the facial features. And then the video last week was about how to put those facial features together to make a very generic portrait. And this week we're looking at an actual photo, and this photo that I'm looking at in my example is of an artist named Kara Walker. She is who I chose to draw, so feel free to draw along with me, or you could choose your own person if you have someone else in mind that you would like to draw. I chose a black and white photo, so it was a little more simple when I went to add the shading, so whether or not you use a black and white photo is up to you, but let's catch up with where we're at in the video a little bit. Something to think about when you are drawing a face from a reference picture is that you have to look at that reference picture. So every line that I'm making, I'm looking back at this picture and seeing what is the angle that this line needs to be at. How far away is the eye from the nose? And I'm taking little measurements with my eyes and sometimes with my fingers and sometimes pointing with the pencil at my phone screen. And just like I'm doing here, taking a little measurement, her corner of her mouth drops down from where the center of her eye is. So I'm actually taking my pencil and making that line, taking a little measurement, and trying to get the features of the drawing as close as I can to the features of the picture. So it's really important to actually use your reference picture. Don't just have it open beside you. Look at the angles of things, and more importantly, look at the space between things. Now I'm going in and finding the measurement from the center part of her lips to where the bottom of her chin is. You'll see that when I draw a face, I don't start with the circle of the head. I like to draw with the features first. Um, that's just a personal preference, and it's not the right way to do things. It's just how I do things. I just find that it helps me to get a more accurate shape of the face in the long run. So now we're back at the lips. I'm looking at the angle of the lips that I see in the picture. So how far away is the line of the bottom lip from what I already have? And what I have here is the center part of the lips that I started with. So it's really important to keep looking back at your reference photo and seeing how much space do I need to leave before I start this next line, and what angle does the next line need to be at. Those are the two most important things to think about when you're drawing from a reference photo of a person or of anything else that you're trying to draw. So let's look at what I'm drawing now, and what I'm drawing now is the chin. I am taking what I already have done, checking my work and seeing if those angles are correct, and then using those angles to figure out what I don't have. So I'm looking at the space between the side of the chin and the mouth, and the space between the side of the eye and the side of the head, and trying to figure out, now that I have some facial features to go off of, what shape does her face need to be? How big is her forehead? How big is her chin? How wide are her cheeks? And then after I figured that out, I went in and place some eyebrows, and again I'm looking at the space from the top of her eye to the eyebrow and trying to leave the correct amount of space based on this picture that I have. And now I'm going in and adding in some smaller details. I'm looking at the space between, and it's very hard to see in my little reference photo, but the space between the top of her eyelid and the opening of her eye, and putting in some smaller details. And I would recommend when you're drawing, get the big stuff down first and then go in and add all the little details, because you don't want to spend a very long time working on tiny little details only to find out that they're in the wrong place because you didn't have the bulk of the drawing done first. That is my third big piece of advice for you. So just to recap a little bit, when you are drawing from a reference picture, pay close attention to the angles of the lines you are drawing. Pay close attention to the space between features, because that is how you get things into the right place. And then after you have a pretty good idea of where all the bigger things are, go in and add the smaller details. And here you can see I'm adding some of the smaller details on the nose. And this is the point in the drawing where I start to add in some of the shading. I like to shade as I go after I get to a place where I'm pretty comfortable with the basic drawing that I have laid out, because the shapes of the shadows actually end up helping you to get a more accurate depiction of the picture you're looking at. The shapes of the shadows are just as important as looking at the space between things, and actually they can even help you to figure out how much space needs to be between things, because you can sort of measure with the shadows that you're filling in. This is a lot of information. I'm aware drawing is not an easy thing to do. It's kind of a new way of thinking of how you look at things. So you're paying attention to things that you wouldn't normally pay attention to in day-to-day life. And I'm really looking at the details and the intricacies of this individual person's face. I am not worried so much about all of those rules that I talked about last week with the measurements and where things need to fit between. I'm looking at this person's proportions and trying to get the facial features accurate to what her face looks like. And like I keep saying, looking at the angle of the lines, looking at the space between the features, those are going to be two very, very important things when you're trying to draw accurately from a reference photo. And I really sped along here. The shading is another thing that's really important when you're trying to get a drawing to look like a certain person, because when you're looking at a person's face, the way the shadows are falling make them look like themselves or look like this certain picture of this person. And oh, here I'm actually going in and adding in the hairline, and again I'm looking at how much space is between where I have the eyebrows and the side of the head and the top of the hairline. And oh, I went in and popped that ear on the side of her head. And again, looking at the space between the nose and the side of the head, and where on the side of her head does her ear start and end. And I'm using the facial features to sort of measure that out. And I'm only drawing what I see in the picture and trying not to make up a bunch of extra information. And we have really almost reached the end of this drawing here. As you start to think about what you are going to do for the project this week, I would like you to keep in mind the advice that I've given you. Know that you have to draw a portrait of a person that you have access to a picture of. So that can be anyone you find on the internet. This is just for practice. Typically, if you're making artwork, you want to find a picture that you have taken yourself, so you're not taking someone's photography and passing it off as your own artwork. But this is just for practice. We're not worried about copyright. We're not worried about selling these, because it's just practice. You're learning. We're learning together. The hair is what I'm working on now in the drawing. I really tried to capture the shape that I saw in the picture of the hair. And like I said last week, hair is a totally different beast. Hair texture can be really complicated, and in the case of my photo, there wasn't a lot of detail in the picture. The photographer that took this shot was more focused on capturing the detail in the face and not so much the texture of the hair. So I got the basic shape, and then I added some shadows and tried to pay attention to the direction of the lines that I was adding in, but I wasn't necessarily worried about making it actually look like this hair, just getting the basic shapes. As I was finishing up this drawing, I was really taking a good look at the depiction that I I had at the end, and I really wasn't happy with the way it turned out. So you'll see me pop in here in a second, but I'm actually going to end up redoing this drawing.
I also wanted to mention that the first time I filmed this, I wasn't really happy with the way the portrait came out. And that just happens sometimes. It was the first thing I had drawn that day. With drawing, it's really important to do warm-ups as well. And I didn't do that yesterday. So today I went back and I drew the same portrait again. So at the end of the video, I actually have my second pass, my second try at drawing, and I was happier with the results. So keep that in mind. It doesn't matter how long you've been drawing for, and for most of you, it might be new, it might be something you've done for a few years, but you don't have a ton of practice with doing this. And just like anything else, drawing takes practice. With practice, it will get easier.
So I included this little time lapse here at the end showing me trying again. And I think most of you will agree, the second time this drawing went much better for me, because just like anything else, drawing takes practice. And I know I've just said that, but it's really true. Drawing, just like anything else that you do in life, it gets easier with practice, guys. So let this week be a portrait practice for you. Don't worry about it being perfect, and if you're really unhappy with it at the end, you can do it again just like I did, and I think you'll be happier the second time around.
Middle school was the time that I decided that drawing was something I was interested in, and drawing faces was one of the things that got me into drawing, which is why I've been focusing on it so heavily during this class. I have been providing more options for those of you not interested in drawing faces, which is perfectly okay. But I'm a little older than middle school now, and I've kind of gotten away from drawing faces. I don't practice that often. So since I've been introducing all of you to it, I kind of wanted to brush up on my skills. So I've been practicing in my sketchbook at home outside of what I'm doing for you all in class. So I wanted to give you a little peek at that. On Instagram, there's this little challenge called the 100 Face Challenge that I've been very slowly participating in. And the idea is that you draw 10 faces every day because, once again, practice makes you better. So doing one face a day is great. Doing 10 faces a day is better. I believe, oh, she's so scary, this little girl. I believe that I've drawn 12 faces so far. It's been more than one day. I've not been keeping up very well, but I wanted to share with you what I've been working on in my time at home. And that's really all I had to say to you all today. If you have questions, like always, please let me know in Google Classroom. I look forward to seeing what you all are creating, and I just want you to keep in mind that the way that I do things works for me. My goal is for you to find a way that works for you. So try the way that I show you, and then develop your own way. Good luck, guys. I'll talk to you this week.